Good afternoon, everyone. Dan Bates, President and CEO, Greater Hamilton Chamber of Commerce. We have a pretty big audience today and more joining. This is part three of a three-part series of generational differences in the workplace. If you've missed the other two parts, first of all, shame on you. But second of all, you can catch up on our YouTube channel. They have been nothing short of amazing. So I'm sure that today, perceptions, generalizations, and real life examples as part three is going to keep us glued to the edge of our seat, just like the other two have. So we have with us today Austin Plensler, currently HR and safety for ThyssenKrupp. So Austin, it's yours.
Awesome. Welcome back, everybody. See some familiar faces. Excited to get this going. This is our last section, arguably our most important section, because some of these things you guys will be able to take with you, tie back to your companies, or even in your own life at this perspective that we're going to talk about today. To recap quickly, the first section is really about understanding the generational differences. What is that? What does that mean? How do I understand what each generation does? We then walk through communication. So how do we communicate amongst these folks? Again, and now we're getting into real life perceptions, but also what we want to be able to do is say, yes, these are perceptions, generalizations, real life examples. I also want to show you some of the things that relate to how do you entice, keep these folks in your workplace? How do you keep them engaged and eager, what have you? So that'll be another good point for you guys. Hopefully we get a couple little nuggets out of that. I will tell you again, I like saying this in all my presentations. These are, again, generational trends. This does not mean that it necessarily applies to you. So if I say something and you may get offended, I apologize, but realize that I'm talking about not you specifically, more of the generation. Each person is their own unique person. I think we all know this. So when you see some of these things, they may not hit totally home, or you may just understand a piece of parts of it. That's okay, because every single person is different and unique. However, on a collective scale, this is some of the things that we see. Okay, so with that being said, let's kind of get into perceptions, generalizations, and real life examples. What I want to be able to do here, guys, with you today is first start off with examples. I think it's important to say, how are you guys retaining the knowledge? Are you still getting it? Then what does this mean necessarily in the workplace? Or what does this mean when you see it maybe out in public or with your own family? We'll walk through the four generations examples that we've had from previous sessions. Again, please, by all means, interrupt me, give an answer, give your thoughts or opinions. You guys have been wonderful about doing that in the past presentations, and I love it. It makes my job a lot easier, and I can also feed off of it as well. So with that being said, I kind of want to hop in some real life examples. I'm going to show it on the screen for you guys, and then we're going to kind of walk through it together. So for the first example we have, you're leading a critical team meeting about upcoming process changes. As you explain the details, you notice Billy, a millennial team member, frequently looking down at his phone. The behavior continues throughout the discussion, making you feel like he is distracted or disinterested. I think we've all been there. I want to say, how are you feeling as we talk about this? What is your thoughts? Have you seen this in your personal life? And what do you think this millennial is up to? Is he scrolling TikTok? What is he doing, Mr. Billy?
I have an idea. I
Okay.
think whatever this process is that this gentleman's talking about, he's probably doing some research on it to see if he can find out how valid it is.
Love that, Jill. So maybe doing a little quick research to make sure he can talk to you about it, or maybe he's not totally confident in it. Love it.
Correct. Correct.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Anybody else? Tanya, you look eager to answer. I'm looking at you on my other screen. Okay.
I have one.
Sure, go ahead, Cindy.
Austin. I think he's double tasking because um, he's trying to listen, but at the same time, he wants to use his time to do something else.
Sure. Okay, good. Very good. All right. And I appreciate those two guys. I think those are two good examples here. It could be either one. I don't disagree with you. And the point I'm trying to say here, guys, is what could Billy really be doing? Millennials are now more comfortable with their phones, how they operate as tools in the professional settings, where again, remember previous generations, that wasn't such a, first of all, they didn't necessarily exist. And secondly, you kind of, when they first came on the scene, we thought you're texting or you're calling, which they could be doing too. But in this example, Billy's actually using his phone to take notes of what you were saying so he could reflect on them later and make sure he caught everything that you were saying. I think most of us, and myself included, are accustomed to notepads. The other piece of this puzzle is if it's not your phone, laptops, right? A lot of people are pecking away at their laptops and you don't think they're paying attention. What I notice is a lot of folks use the OneNote app and they're actually taking notes on it as they're going. Now, that is not for all cases. Yes, there are people that are actually doing other things that should be paying attention. Fine, we can control this. But in this example, he was actually taking notes. Jill, I appreciated your comment about saying, hey, maybe he's looking something up. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think we've all done that. Like if you don't really know, you're kind of like scrambling really quickly, maybe using a chat GPT per se to understand what that is. And the biggest point I'm trying to drive here, guys, if you perceived him as being rude or inconsiderate, you might not want to make that assumption of all millennials because it's not necessarily fair, right? They're using technology, they're leveraging technology. And it's not just for millennials, but this is a good example to show how, hey, maybe we don't take that right off the rip approach. Because I've been in presentations to you guys where I think that as well. I think it's a natural human response. But then I realized they're actually taking notes or they're doing something like this. So good example here. All right, you guys ready for example number 2? You're approached by your boomer boss in the hallway, or you approach your boomer boss in the hallway, hoping to have an impromptu discussion about your performance goals and career development. However, they give you a short response and seem eager to move on, making you feel like they're uninterested in your growth. So, how are we feeling here? Suddenly, your boomer boss is giving you the cold shoulder. From what we learned, guys, why do you think this occurred?
Probably taken by surprise.
Sure.
And would rather have this conversation in a more, scheduled time frame.
Yes, that's what I was going to say, that boomers like to have scheduled appointments, and that's where it would be more professional to do it in that realm rather than in the hallway.
Perfect. Great job.
Ditto.
Cindy, go ahead.
Ditto.
Ditto. Good. You guys, I tell you what, you guys are good learners. Your boomer boss is not being mean, cold-hearted, or disinterested in your career. Your boomer boss loves structure and have dedicated time to discuss your performance goals with you. A better way to approach the situation is to make sure you set some time on their calendar and give them a fair amount of time for prep for your meeting. Again, you guys nailed it right on the head. I appreciate you guys saying that. I see this most often with the millennials to the boomers, not necessarily the Xers to the boomers in the workplace. And this is something that I've had to navigate and make sure people are still okay as we business partners, HR folks. So just keep that in the back of your mind that this could be one of the leading causes to some of these maybe disruptions within their relationships. Fantastic. Good work, guys. All right, next one. Example 3. You schedule a formal structured meeting with your Gen Z employee to discuss their performance and career goals. During the meeting, they seem disengaged, checking their phone occasionally, and not taking many notes. They don't ask many questions, which makes you feel like they are uninterested or unmotivated. So, what's going on with our Gen Z pal here? What do you think is going on here with this formal structured meeting?
I'm going to just throw out the negative because that's my
Sure.
son's age.
Mm-hmm.
He's uninterested and unmotivated. and he really just doesn't want to deal with this. Why do I need feedback?
Good.
You know, if I wanted it, I'll ask for it.
That's a good point, Cindy. I appreciate that. Yeah, because they want it more frequently. So why are you doing this big hoopla hour-and-a-half meeting with me? It's very formal, right? What are we doing? What are we doing here? Yeah, it's a good point.
He probably wants he wants to avoid the eye contact and the engagement and go to his phone because he's not comfortable doing that type of activity, so to speak. So the phone is a comfort zone for him.
Excellent point, Bill. I think you're absolutely right. That's something else you see from this generation a lot more than the others because guess what? They've had it their whole lives.
Mm-hmm.
Me being a millennial, I think I told you guys before, I didn't get my first phone. I think I was a freshman in high school, which is still pretty young, all things considered. But it was a flip phone, right? It's not like I was doing a whole lot of cool stuff on it. So
Austin, the other thing I wanted to say is I just thought of this. The generation seems to not really value authority as much. And maybe they're asking for feedback from a lot of different people, and it doesn't just have to come from the boss. But they also, what I hear too from that generation is they're tired of getting feedback that doesn't include positive feedback. So they're kind of disengaged because they want to know all the time what they're doing right. And instead they just hear sometimes the negative.
Yeah, that's a good point. Cindy, you brought up, right? I think with that kind of goes for the millennials too. And we talked about how they were raised, right? Overwhelmingly big praise, and you're always doing, you're so good, you're so great, you're so good, you're so great. And that's the Xers or the boomers compensating for what they grew up with, and they put it onto those generations. I don't disagree with you. I think that's one where I can tell you personally, as an HR professional, that I have to be a lot softer with millennials or Gen Z for sure, for some different reasons. Maybe it's how they're born, how they're raised, what they're seeing. Again, each person's different, right? But I do tend to notice that in my career so far to this point. So,
Yeah, our students at the university would cry when you'd give them feedback.
ugh.
I mean, I didn't cry in college when I got feedback, but I'm seeing a lot in the classes when they were doing project work and stuff. And when I was doing that, when professors and the people grading and stuff, they really got upset. Lots of tears, lots of what would you call it? Interventions. We have to sit down with them and tell them what the feedback's for. They don't seem to understand.
You think of the sandwich approach, right, Cindy? Positive, negative, positive on the way out,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, I noticed that too. Actually, it's interesting coming from two different industries, one being paper and one being manufacturing. Well, let's just say automotive manufacturing. They tend to be some of the more aggressive industries, right? So meaning like you have to really get stuff out the door. You have to have quick conversations and maybe hard conversations at times. And even when the intention isn't to be super critical, but they did make a mistake, if you're too direct between the eyes, they will crumble, right? So it's like you then have to train your maybe older Xers, boomers, on how to be delicate, which then you get the eye roll, right? So it's always kind of like this crazy game you got to play with a different generation. And you're absolutely right, Cindy. Fantastic. So let's get into this, guys. Possible answers. Your Gen Z employees not being dismissive or uninterested in their career. Gen Z prefers a more collaborative and conversational approach to feedback rather than a rigid formal meeting. Additionally, they may be using their phones to jot down key points or check relevant information, just like the millennials did, right? We just talked about that. Cindy, I think they hit some of your points, Jill, for you as well. And then a better way to approach situations is create a more interactive and casual discussion rather than a strict one-sided meeting, encouraging open dialogue and incorporating digital tools they're comfortable with and giving real-time feedback. If you guys remember, that's something we've been saying a lot about these two generations. I know they sometimes get married together, but really more so for the Gen Z. The more frequent, the better. And so these meetings, you don't, it kind of sounds crazy. You don't really, if you walk into these formal performance reviews, it should be very easy because you've been having these conversations. Now, as a manager or leader, it becomes much harder because you're always giving constant feedback. So that's always that fine balancing act with the Gen Z guys.
Austin, can I add a comment here?
Sure.
In my experience, anyway, with some Gen Zs, it's interesting because at the same time they can't take it, they can sure dish it out. So they can be very dismissive of an idea that they think is not current or relevant or something. But if someone does that to them, you're right, they crumble.
So Dan, why do you think that is? What do you think
I don't know.
like that?
That's why I threw it out there.
Yeah. Well, team, let's ask the question. I want to ask the team. What do you guys think? Why do you think that is? They can't take it, but they can dish it. Cindy, what are you seeing from the educational side? Are you seeing the same thing? Oh, you're on mute, Cindy.
Sorry. I did that because my dog is next to me.
Very fine.
There seems to be a shift in the last 4 or 5 years, but that whole generation, when I say shift, it's even worse. But before that, they weren't communicating. They're not communicating face to face anymore because there's so much texting going on and so much. What was it? Either you said this or I read this somewhere recently. It's a lost generation of communication that they don't know how to communicate to one another. It's like they didn't learn. And some of that is the technology that they're interacting with, and then COVID. I think that's my guess. Those two, and especially COVID, for that critical period of time where they were supposed to be bonding with friends and doing things, they were too isolated. And then we were seeing mental health issues too coming out of that. So some of it might be they're now afraid to talk to people. And so I don't know. That's just kind of what I was observing. There may be more to it than that.
I think you hit on some key things that occur. right? I think that is very, very good. Now, Pam, you're shaking your head. I know you see it in the workplace. I don't know if we've fully seen the impact of COVID on the younger, I should say Gen Z or Alpha at this point. It'll be left to see, but it is a bit scary, Cindy, to be honest with you. You're going through formative parts of your life where you're not in person and you're not, on the playground, or you're doing this, or even the college kids that are not hanging out and going to do whatever they do as college kids, right? And you took that away. And that impact, even whether it be a year, two, three, whatever it was, depending on your state, it'll be left to see what happens. I think, Dan, that's an interesting way to look at it, is saying maybe some of these things have given them maybe the keyboard warrior approach, where if I'm behind a keyboard, I'm a bigger, badder guy or gal. But I could say that probably goes for all generations too, not necessarily just Gen Z. So that's a good point. All right. All right, you guys ready? All right. Next example we got here. You notice your Gen X team member often works independently and doesn't regularly participate in team chats or social events. When you ask for input in a group meeting, they tend to stay quiet or offer brief responses. This makes you wonder if they're disengaged or not a team player. So what is going on with our Gen X team member here? You guys remember, this is my favorite generation, by the way. Pam, what do you think?
How did I know you were going to call on me? Um, obviously, I think it's the Gen X is from the standpoint, and if I recall, and since I fall in this generation, the way I would approach that is the fact that it's either from the standpoint that working independently is the comfort zone. We prefer to give me the task, give me the challenge, let me figure it out, and I'm going to go do it. There's not a lot of collaboration per se, sometimes depending on the task, but they'd rather get it done and move on. So it's not that they're being disengaged by not engaging in social events. It might just be might just not be the right time for them, or they've got other things going on that their schedules are booked or whatever, but they don't need to explain that. They don't feel like they have to justify not being involved in a social event or in team chats. As long as, my job is to get it done and, meet the expectations of the group and the project, then so be it. No fluff.
I mean, I don't know if I can say it any better. So let's get into the answer. I think you nailed it. Your Gen X employee isn't disengaged. They're just used to a more autonomous, results-driven work style, exactly as Pam mentioned. Generation X tends to value efficiency, independence, and a clear separation between work and personal life. They often prefer to let the work speak for itself rather than engage in constant communication or casual check-ins. Interesting here, because we talk about casual check-ins. While that is true for X, you guys have to remember that Xers tend to like to have those stop by, pop by meetings when they need to. So I think this in this sense, they're talking about more constant check-ins, but they do enjoy that piece. So Pam, I think you nailed it. I think you saw the slide. I'm just joking. A better way to approach the situation is to recognize and respect their preference for independence while still inviting for their input to be in meaningful ways, and consider giving them a heads up before meetings so they can prepare their thoughts and feel more comfortable contributing. You can also find other ways to connect that align with their values. Check one-on-ones, right? Focus on goals, outcomes, practical solutions. If you guys remember, Gen X loves the bigger picture, so make sure you keep tying it to how this impacts the company at a larger level. That's just something I want to make sure we mention about the Gen X guys here. So Pam, I think you nailed it. You got 100%. Gold star. Way to go. Awesome. All right. So key takeaways, guys. Those are just four examples to kind of get our brains going again. Remember what we've been talking about for the last couple of meetings. So again, takeaways, you guys know this. I've been saying it ad nauseum, but no generation is superior. Each generation brings strengths and weaknesses. Managers should consider each employee differently. And then perceptions can hurt your opinion of future employees in that generation, whether warranted or not. So just remember, take your perceptions. Yes, this is what happens. However, not everybody's the same, right? I think that's one you probably see a lot, Pam and Jill and Cindy in your respective workplaces, and that how it does ring true that not every single person in these generations have these specific perceptions. Good. Okay, so we're going to get into employee attraction and retention. So Pam, feel free as a fellow HR colleague here, if you want to comment here as well. This is some interesting stuff here. It'd be interesting to see what you're seeing on your end of the spectrum as well. So when we're talking about this, we want to talk about attraction and retention. So what motivates the employees within different demographics or different things here? And I think we all know that the greatest motivator ever in the history of time is money, right? Okay, so yes, all generations enjoy money. They all like respect. They all like recognition, action, meaning, and relationships. And it plays a part in each of these generations. So that's going to be my caveat blanket statement I say before we jump into this. All of these impact people within different generations. Now, the piece of this puzzle is some are more important than others. So as we go through this, we're going to keep that in our minds as we go through different things for different employees. So when we look at money specifically, because that's a hot item, right? And we talk about the boomers themselves, you have to remember what boomers are trying to do, right? So boomers at this point in their career, they're looking for financial security and they're really staring down the barrel of retirement, right? So keep that in mind as you deal with your boomer employees, that this is going to be one of the more important items that they're looking for. And if you guys recall from previous sessions, there is a chance boomers will continue past retirement age to make sure that they're squared away. The 08 crash didn't help. All the things we're seeing in the recent, I'd probably say 5 to 6 years. And what I'm trying to get to is COVID, and also some of the other things we're dealing with. It's really starting to screw up the market in certain different ways. A lot of fluctuation. So if you guys recall from our very first section, boomers will be hanging on longer than 65. So we've got to keep that in our minds as we're employing these folks to make sure that we keep them in the forefront and say, hey, what's it going to take to get you to retirement? Focus on that piece because remember, they want to retire at some point. You don't want to work forever, and keep that in the back of your mind as you're going forward. And most importantly, if you recall from previous sections, boomers are extremely loyal to companies. Very, very, very loyal. So what you want to be able to do is find a company that is financially stable, that they can kind of harness, and they can ride out the last, who knows, 5, 10 years with these different companies. And that's something that you got to keep in mind. So when think about this as if you're recruiting someone. If you're recruiting a baby boomer, it's not necessarily true for everybody, so keep that in mind. That's my caveat. But keep in the back of your mind, they're looking for financial security. They want a company that's successful, and there's a good chance they're going to work longer than what you think they're going to, right? So just keep that in your mind. That way you can get rid of a lot of biases and get rid of a lot of different items here to make sure you're looking at these folks. But you also can use this for your internal folks as well. Like, what do you think's going on here? Now, the best way to figure this out, guys, is just having career conversations. It makes your life so much easier. Hey, like, what does it look like for you? Are you happy here? What's the next 5 to 10 years look like? What do you want to do? Right? That way you can start getting into individual pieces of the puzzle with these boomers specifically. That's good for any generation, by the way. All right. Xers. Interesting with Xers, they are really, really focused on opportunity to live. Trips with families, toys, boats, etc. So if you think of this generation, depending on where you fall within this, you could have kids probably as young as, I would say, mid-teens, early teens to late 20s, early 30s. So that's kind of a big gap of when you see Xers kids, but they want to have the opportunity to live, right? They did all the time growing their kids up. They did all the things they needed to do. They're at, any kind of soccer field, football field, baseball field, whatever, for many, many years. So now it's time to start saying, hey, what can I go do, right? So it's trips with my family, get a bunch of toys, if it's boats, if it's UTVs, if it's four-wheelers, what have you. They want a wage that balances family and fun. I think it's a big piece here. And remember, guys, going all the way backwards, Gen X is the first one to introduce work-life balance. So this makes a lot of sense is why they would want a wage that can balance family and fun. You don't necessarily have to pay through the teeth for a Gen Xer. Again, that's a big caveat. Remember, every person's different. And then you must know that they must know that their wage is competitive in the workplace. I think that's a big piece of the puzzle. It doesn't necessarily need to be top dollar, but they need to feel like they're being paid equitable and fair to whatever the market's doing. Again, remember, they coined work-life balance, and they want to make sure that they're being paid appropriately. And that, again, that could go for most generations too. All right, I'm gonna pause here. What do we think about the boomers and the Xers? Do we see this? We see this with some compensation? Pam, as an HR professional, yeah?
I do. I was just making a comment the other day. that it's unfortunate, in a manufacturing setting, I'm seeing an influx of much older applications. And it's tough because, when you're looking to hire for 40 plus hour, 40 hours a week plus overtime, do I really want to be sitting and having that conversation when somebody who is 65, 67 years old and isn't ready to retire yet? That's tough. And it's hard to see that going on in the marketplace. And then I've got the younger generation. I've got the flip side where I need you to show up on time. I need you to be here. I need you to be here on time. So it's this. It's an interesting time that we're in right now. From the quality, the age, the desire to want to still be working. It's a catch-22. It really is. And I do notice it with the boomers, like we're having conversations. Currently, I have there's a distinct gap in our base to where we've got a much older generation, and then there's a gap, and then there's the younger generation. And those conversations, I like how you said career conversations. They're becoming very important from whether it's a succession planning standpoint, whether it's a building the bench standpoint, trying to capture that experience before it walks out the door, type of conversations. And it makes people uncomfortable. That's something like, well, are we allowed to ask that? I get that a lot. Are we allowed to have these conversations?
Yeah.
Type of thing. I'm like, yes, because we need to know what their plans are. We need to understand kind of, we value them and they have a position, but we're not pushing them out the door. It's more along the lines of help us train your replacement, help us continue that knowledge that we don't lose what you worked so hard for so long. We want to retain that. And so, yes, that's how we shape those conversations. We're not saying, got to give us a date and time, but, just, engage with us.
Yeah. I think there's another piece to the puzzle too with the baby boomers. Some work because they need to, and some want to continue working so they are still relevant and still feel like they're still alive, because too many times people in that age group retire and have nothing. They're like, now what do I do? And so you see, people who are excessive volunteers and stuff like that. But I know a lot of people in that age group that want another career or go back to work or something, not necessarily with something that they're looking for a long-term career strategy. They just want to be relevant. They want to be, with other people. They want to keep sharp. They want to be challenged.
Dan, I say you bring a good point, because that generation, I mean, we talk about it all the time, is that work ethic. Mm-hmm. They were such hard workers and very loyal to companies, and again, generalization, this doesn't fit everybody, but that it is, that generation really rolled up their sleeves and gave it their all for a very long time. And so I think it's interesting to transition that from the boomer generation then to the Gen X, where they've seen their parents work so hard for so long for so many companies, and that's where that work-life balance wants to come in. They're like, I will give you my all, I will do my best, but I want some flexibility because I want to be able to do other things besides work for the rest of my life.
You guys are all over it. And that's the thing that we're going to get to. Pam, you mentioned a couple things, and then Dan, you also mentioned a really important point as well. And we'll get to that here in a second. But both of your comments are extremely valid, and it's a strange spot to be as an HR professional for sure. But to Dan's point, to keeping that mental edge, keeping your mind busy, especially if you don't have hobbies, I think that's the part, even for me, That scares me. He's like, man, am I gonna have enough hobbies by the time I retire? Like, I hope I do. I can't golf forever, right? I mean, I got to figure something else out. So it's those kind of things where you have to have that piece of the puzzle. And that is another contributing factor why they're staying around longer, for sure, no doubt. Awesome, guys. Thank you for that. All right, millennials. Let's figure these guys out. I put this in caps locks. So millennials want immediate gratification. I think you guys know that. Time is as valuable as money. And then reward excellent results frequently, not necessarily with salary bumps, but can also be spot bonuses. So what I mean here, guys, millennials are one of the first generations, I'd say the tail end of Xers, that spot bonuses. What I mean by that, guys, is, hey, you did a really excellent job on project XYZ and you saved the company X dollars. So here's $3,000, here's $5,000, here's $1,000, whatever the dollar amount is, but that instant gratification. And that's an important thing to keep in mind as you talk about millennials and Gen Z, because that way you can keep your labor costs in order and you're not just jacking up their base salary all the time or their bonus potential all the time. There are different things you can do to reward millennials. And we'll talk more about rewards here in a second. This is just the money piece of it, and it'll tie all together here. Good. And then Gen Z, guys, when we think about this newest generation, again, pretty interesting when you look at the research here. Financial independence, which I know was a big one, Cindy. If you remember, we first talked about this together about oh, really? They really care about it? But then we kind of broke that down together and what they've seen in their lives. Side hustles are huge. I would say with the explosion of social media, maybe some TikTok guys that you can see. There's some big names. Like I know one that my niece always plays is Mr. Beast. I don't know what he does. He gives away money all day and does cool things. So these kind of side hustle opportunities, not necessarily just on social media, but side hustles in general have been extremely popular amongst Gen Z. So Gen Z values multiple income streams, is willing to change jobs for better pay and growth. I think that last part kind of makes sense for most generations. More frequently, probably makes more sense, but this side hustles thing is very interesting. And you'll see actually some of your younger millennials. I know I have a group of friends as a small data point that a lot of these guys own their own houses. They own multiple houses. They rent houses out. They're kind of like slumlords, if you will. But they have all these side hustles. They own this car detailing business. And I don't ever know how they have time to do it, but it's truly very, very relevant within the millennials and Gen Z outside of holding a full-time job too. So, and that kind of ties together and tethers back in with work-life balance. Guys, if you have side hustles, you have to have time to do them. But also work-life balance from a mental standpoint. If you remember, that's a very important piece of this puzzle for generation is the mental piece of this, making sure you're mentally healthy, your mental health is in good order, and work-life balance provides that. So yes, salary is important, but flexibility and then also having well-being benefits are just as critical. I've never seen so many people at a career fair ask about benefits packages and what else do we offer besides a base compensation and short-term incentive than I have with this generation and the youngest, if you will, millennials here. So it's been actually a very interesting trend that we've seen, especially within the HR realm. And last but not least, financial stability is key. Concerns about student debt and cost of living drive their preference for transparent pay and strong benefits. Again, Pam, that's what I've seen. I don't know if you agree with what I said on Gen Z and millennials from an HR standpoint.
Oh, spot on.
Good. Yeah, it's pretty interesting ride, especially with the sustainability piece. That's another one, guys. I know I mentioned it previously, but the focus on what your company is doing sustainability wise, as far as whether it be social sustainability, if it's environmental sustainability, whatever it may be, they really, really want to know. And that's something that we're also seeing from an HR standpoint. So awesome. So that's money. I just want to break out money on its own. So now let's go talk about other motivating factors for these different generations. So we have boomers. Let's go back to boomers. So we went through all four. Let's get back to boomers. The big piece here, driven by respect and recognition, public praise often, need to be driven in many years of hard work and dedication, right? So they are very driven people. I believe, Pam, you mentioned that. And then make them subject matter experts on projects. So this encapsulates a lot of what Pam mentioned. Almost all of it completely does. The respect and recognition. You got to know that they rolled up their sleeves. They're it's argued to say building block backbone of where America is today. They get a lot of praise for that. publicly praising them is something where I think, depending on who you are as a person, remember that. But what you'll notice is if you do award for achievement, I don't know, something like this. You finish this project, you did a great job leading it, you did a great job mentoring these employees, getting them in front of a group and giving them maybe just a simple certificate and really appreciating them in a public setting is really nice. And you have to remember, back to Pam's point, all those years of dedication and hard work. I'm so loyal to the company that they then give me a certificate for thanking me for doing that is a big deal. It really means a lot. I think it means a lot to a lot of generations, but for this generation specifically, and I can't stress this last bullet point enough, guys. If you have folks that are boomers that are looking maybe to start throttling down in their career and kind of maybe starting to eye that retirement piece, there's a really cool way that you can float this by them. And when I say subject matter experts, what I really mean is also mentoring opportunities. So when Pam mentioned they have all this knowledge, oh my goodness, you know how to take apart this machine and put it back together, and you're the only one that knows how to do it because you've been doing it for 45 years. What you can offer them is saying, hey, you're awesome. You know a lot of things here. Would you be willing to mentor these different employees on the way out? Hey, you know what? I'll reduce your schedule to 30 hours, maybe 20, right? Let's just hang out, make sure we can do this. And what you'll find is you'll get a lot of people very excited to do that because now they get to show off all their hard work. They get to show off their career. They get to show off all the things that they did to the next generation. And harnessing that is very, very, very important if you can. Sometimes you'll run into managers or bosses that don't think it's worth your time. I will tell you that you need to talk to them and say that this is very much worth your time, and it'll help operational efficiencies or any other efficiencies you have in your organization. Good. Fantastic. Next one, Xers. Let's get into them. Let them know they're important to the team. Always important to make sure you know them because remember, they like to work independently, but they still like to let them know, hey, you're doing a great job. Allow work-life balance. Again, remember this group is the one that it was the latchkey kids. They're the ones staying at home a lot, provide independence and flexibility. And then remember, they are entrepreneurial by nature. They love to be entrepreneurial. So this, again, guys, goes very much in with their Xers. We talked a lot about the Xers. Dan, I believe you're going to say something.
No, sorry, that was just a dry cough.
Oh, okay, perfect. I just want to make sure you had the opportunity.
Thanks.
So guys, we'll pause here quickly like we've done. We do 2 generations and pause. For these 2 groups, have you guys seen this work in the workplace? Have you tried these methods? Have you ever thought about doing something like this? What do you guys think? Dan?
Well, I have a question here.
Sure.
So, work-life balance thing, I think that this generation has taught other generations a lesson here in that. But how do you keep that from that can also get out of control, where the expectation is beyond what the job really can allow as far as work-life balance?
And I think work-life balance is a very broad stroke term, Dan. I know where you're trying to go with this. I would tell you it's all about expectation settings on the front end before you hire them. Hey, this is what the job requires. This is how many hours you need to work. What I mean here is saying you're not grinding these guys into the ground doing 60, 70 hours a week. You're not being fair to them as far as an employer goes. It's kind of the mindset I had here, and allowing them to say, hey, the expectation is 40 hours. If you're salaried exempt, maybe 45 because you are exempt, maybe 50 on some of the bad days. But just making sure you're adhering to it and you're not grinding these guys down, because what you'll find is the boomers don't mind so much. They're very willing to do that almost always as a generation, but the Xers are also willing to do it, but they won't do it for prolonged periods of time. And I think that's the piece that you really got to kind of drive home with these guys. They're team players, there's no doubt. But again, remember how they were raised. They don't want to keep going this hard all the time. Hopefully that answers your question, Dan. Okay, good. With no other comments, we will continue forward. Next one, we got millennials. So what are the motivating factors for them? They crave action and instant gratification. Get them involved in many different projects, deliver feedback constantly, cross-functionality, keep them involved even with small parts or small parts of projects, then keep them occupied. You want to keep their head down. So with millennials, you have to remember these guys are usually, again, speaking in very broad strokes, they're always wanting to make sure they know what their next steps are. They want to know what 3 to 5 years looks like. They want to know they're doing a good job now, and they want to keep growing their skill set. So that's where you'll see these different projects that may be outside of their functional realm, something like this. So, hey, I don't know, I know you don't know anything about that organization, but maybe you can go help them do something. I want to do this because I'm gonna grow you laterally, not just necessarily up and down. And then also keep them occupied and keep their head down. As long as you do that and you keep these millennials engaged, they will stay with you. But remember what we said the first time, they are the first generation to be free agents. Remember that, the free agent. Dan, you're sending a lot of periods here, buddy. Are you okay? I just want to make sure you're doing all right. I didn't know if you had a comment here.
My notebook was on the keyboard. Sorry.
Got it. No worries. I guess it pop up. I want to make sure you're doing okay. So for the millennials, guys, remember free agents. They are looking for their next opportunity. If you do not provide it, they will not stay. Again, very broad term, but that is the truth for these guys. They're always looking for the next steps. And if it's not there, you may not be able to count on them long term.
Yeah, Austin, quick question on millennials, and because I struggle probably the most with managing this group from the standpoint of constant feedback, constant gratification. There's coming from my comfort level of working, there's a lot of times where I want them to take more ownership of the project or take the initiative. And I spell that out, but then the check-ins and what do you think of this? What do you think? I'm like, can we scale that back a bit without getting irritated, to the point to where I don't sound very coaching and mentoring. So do you have any experience with that? Have you seen the same thing? Has anybody else seen that? Do you have some pointers?
I think it's a fair question. I'll take the first stab. But if you guys on the call want to jump in, by all means, please do. I will tell you in my situation, Pam, I am a millennial leader with a millennial lead team. Okay, so I had everybody on my lead team is a millennial, which is good and bad because I understand how they function, how they operate. When I run into those situations, the way I'm able to combat that, and this sounds very simplistic, so bear with me. And the very front end of me taking this job 3 years ago, I said, hey, this is my management style. This is what you're going to get out of me. Bullet points, it's on our wall and in all our respective offices on purpose because I want them to see it. This is how I manage. I'm hands off. Da, 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 da. You can see how my management style, but then also my expectations are right below it. Very well spelled out, very clear. And what I will tell them is, and this happens, by the way, especially with millennials, this constant gratification is not a good word. Constant, hey, you're doing okay. You're doing all right. You're on the right path. You're on the right path. You're on the right path. That constant communication, the way I'm able to combat that with my guys is I'm going to say, you come to me. You're going to go do it. Okay. You're going to do whatever project it is. You come to me when you hit a roadblock only. And if you hit a roadblock, I want to know what you think solution A, B, and C is. I want 3 solutions for every roadblock. If there's not 3, it can be 2, but you get what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. And what I've noticed is over time, when we get into our one-on-ones, it's no longer, Austin, what do you think? It's, I'm going to go do this. And they're not even asking for feedback anymore, but it took us a second to get there, right? Because they needed to have that affirmation, I'm doing the right thing. And it's not something you can just flip the script and do it overnight. But what I've noticed is when you give them the power to do that and empowerment there and to simply tell them, hey, you're smart, you got it, I trust you, all the things, all the affirmations a couple times, eventually you'll see it kind of taper off into the distance. And that's one thing that I know that I know Dan knows this about me. I'm really, really big in empowerment of my team. And they already know what I'm going to say before they walk in the door. So which is helpful because now they can start thinking this way. And the nice thing is you're now seeing that reverberate into their teams, which is really cool. So kind of high level answer, Pam. And again, we could take this offline if you want. I can share documents, whatever. But that's what I found to be pretty successful with the millennials specifically. I don't usually have to worry about that with my Xers or boomers. Gen Z, the same thing can sort of work for them. They need a little bit more hugs and affirmations. But for the most part, I can treat millennials and Gen Z in that same manner, right? And I think it may help it's coming from a millennial too, right? Keep that all
Right.
things considered, but that's kind of how I do it. So if anybody else want to chime in here,
I
Pam,
just wanted to,
go ahead, Dan.
I think that's an interesting way to approach it because I too struggle with that because they want autonomy to work on a project, but then it's constantly, how am I doing? What about this? What about that? And I'm like, you have total autonomy to make those decisions. Just make those decisions.
Mhm.
So,
And Dan, you're right. And that's what Pam's getting to is like you just have to keep repeating that. I trust you, you're empowered, make the call. I trust you, you're empowered. And don't give them the solution. After a while, just stop giving them solutions. So I don't know, what do you think? I love doing that. They hate when I do it, but I love doing it. I don't know. I don't know. What do you think the answer is?
yeah.
I have no idea. And they're like, well, come on. I was like, what do you think? Oh, I want to do this, this, and this. There we are. There's a solution right there. Oh yeah, okay. And then they walk out or whatever, but they come back and thank us later because like, yeah, you know what? You're absolutely right. I already knew the answer. But you have to deprogram. What you're deprogramming is how they were raised. Constantly, you're doing the right thing. You're doing the right thing. You're doing the right thing. You're awesome. You're doing the right thing. And when you hear that over and over and over again, that's just going to leak into the workplace. So you kind of have to try to deprogram that out of them. And you can only do that over time, right? And some of my experience, again, not the only way to solve the solution, but that's some of the things I've noticed you can do with millennials.
Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Hopefully that helps, Pam. Yeah. Well, Dan, hopefully it helps. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Next one, Gen Z. Let's talk about our Gen Zers. They crave purpose and personal growth in their work. We talked about this. Remember lattice, guys? Lattice versus ladder. A big deal for them, moving them sideways, not just laterally all the time. Value autonomy, but also seek collaboration through digital tools. Whereas collaboration with millennials, they like to do it in person. So keep those two kind of separate. So millennials are always in team sports. They're always doing things together as teams. Gen Z might have been doing things together in teams, but it wasn't necessarily in person. It was more through their phone, through their chats, whatever it may be. So they do value autonomy, but they also want to have that collaboration through digital tools themselves. They prefer frequent real-time feedback over formal reviews. Now, this is one where I'm a bit of a stick in the mud on this. I truly believe in twice a year performance reviews. However, I also believe it's critically important every 2 to 3 weeks to have one-on-ones with all of your direct reports. I will continue to do that. I will always do that until my career is over because that way formal reviews are not daunting. They're easy. You walk into them. They already know what they're going to get. And then off you go with them. And I think that's really provided a ton of value for the millennials on my team and some of the Gen Zs as well, because that way you conquer frequent real-time feedback. Now, you may say, Austin, well, 2 weeks isn't really that frequent. You're right. That's where you have to use your teams and other items to make sure you're giving them feedback. Here's a perfect example. I had one of my employees do an awesome job on a presentation to these huge, massive board members over in Germany. Oh my goodness, she just absolutely rocked it. I was excited for her. So what I did after the call was over, I ran over to her office, gave her a huge high five and said, "You're so awesome. You kick a lot of, that was great, da 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 da," and it's got her really pumped up. Because that's how I felt, by the way. But that alone helped her so much. And that was a really big deal. So when I say real-time feedback, that's kind of what I mean. Make sure you don't let the time slip away. Okay? Engage with them in meaningful work and clear career paths and prioritize work-life balance, mental well-being. So career paths, guys, if you're not already doing this, we really need to focus on it. It is something that's being demanded from these groups. I know something, Pam, you're probably very familiar with this. What they want to see is if I come in and I'm a level 1 so-and-so, I want to know what a level 2 looks like, what a level 3 looks like, what a level 4 looks like, what a level 5 looks like, or whatever that career path may be. And I want to know exactly how to get there. You show me the metrics, you show me what I need to do. I want to know. I demand it. Whereas if you go backwards in a couple of generations, I'd say millennials are sort of lumped in there, but Xers and boomers, that wasn't necessarily always the case, especially not for boomers. Boomers are just going to grind it out and hope promotions come. Xers were the first ones to start saying, okay, maybe what's the next step? Millennials and Gen Z are now demanding that. So like you have to think about that as you work through it. Now, I gave you a very formal, this is 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 or whatever the career path may look like. But as long as you have something that shows the next step, I promise you, that will retain those people maybe 2 to 3 years longer than they would have already stayed. And you got to follow through, right? You got to make sure you're paying them for their knowledge and their education as they're working through these development plans. But development plans is a very, very hot item within the HR realm nowadays, especially, and it's a ton of work. And that's why you're seeing learning and development or organizational development HR people becoming way more popular now, because they're starting to try to build these career paths. If you take that same sentiment and you go to your biggest Fortune 500 companies, I promise you, when you walk in there, you will find a career path in some sort of fashion or way in almost all different organizations there. That's the truth of the matter. And that way you can not have to pay people through the teeth, because you're now offering them career paths and you keep them motivated. They're willing to be there because you care about them and you want them to grow, right? And I know I'm giving a lot of lip service because that's what every HR professional always says, but it's becoming more and more real as we continue to move forward. Okay, fantastic. Any questions on our millennials or Gen Zs? All right, very good. So when we talk about performance results, when you think about performance results for these different guys in these different generations, you have to make sure you're really focusing on, okay, if I have Gen Z people, we just kind of talked about money and other motivating factors. So when I think about them and I think about performance and results, what do I need to do for these generations? Right? It's kind of the concept of this slide. So when you think about Z, I just kind of got off my spiel a little bit there, but you got to seek for purpose-driven work and the career growth, right? So remember, career paths, we just talked about them. Continuous learning. We talk about lattice versus ladder, right? The flexibility and making sure they're mentally taken care of, whether it be opportunities outside of the workplace, via the workplace, meaning there could be philanthropic things, there could be a coach that you have here on site, it could be the EAP, it could be all these different things. Those are so much more important than your traditional career ladders. And when I say growth opportunity, guys, I gave you the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on this upward scale. It doesn't necessarily have to be on a scale. I could say you're going to start here in quality, and then I'm going to go put you over here in the same position in manufacturing operations. Then I'm going to go put you over here in procurement, and then you can go up the ladder too. So keep that in mind. That's the lattice versus ladder concept. They value that a little bit more than the previous generation's career ladder mentalities. Okay. Millennials, very similar to Gen Z, but they love the indulge of accumulating numerous skills. So they want to be able to be they want to have multiple different skill sets so they can branch off in their careers much more than previous generations. I, as a millennial, have only ever been in HR, so I'm probably the one bucking the system here. But there's a lot of my colleagues that I've had or ran into that are millennials that have tried out different career paths so far. And now they're kind of finding the ones that they like. But the accumulating of different skills is also nice. And I'm talking very much in departments within companies. But I will tell you, it's not necessarily always departments. That's our easiest one our mind runs to. But it could also just be skills in general. Like, hey, I want to know how to negotiate well. I don't know how to negotiate. Do I ever negotiate? I don't know. Probably not. But it'd be really cool if I knew how to negotiate. Just random things like this that could be generous to their careers later on. I just remember that. And when they achieve it, make sure you're rewarding them even for lateral moves. What I mean by that is back to this lattice piece, because millennials were the first ones to start talking about lattice versus ladder. That is only seeped into that Generation Z. Xers, I think you guys know this by now, but they adore flexibility of the new career model. Managers' concerns of their favorite and least favorite part of their job. So when I look at this, they adore the flexibility piece of any position or career model that they have. And they also want to make sure that their manager knows what their favorite and least favorite part of their job is. So that way they can maybe say, hey, I want to go focus on this versus that. Just full transparency. Let me run. I want to run, but I need you to know what are some of these things I do like to do, I do not like to do, and how do we make sure that we take care of those Xers most importantly. What we do know about the Xers are they will perform almost always. And again, very broad strokes. There's always bad performers in every generation, but you can really let them go off and get this figured out. But always make sure you tie it back to the bigger picture. You'll hear me continually say that for Xers. And then last but not least, for the boomers, they really appreciate the time spent with them. They like the time spent with the company. Honesty is always really big with them to define the next phase of their career. That way you can perform. They will perform and get you results if they are appreciated and they know that you're being honest, and you know that you have their best interest in mind. Remember, so that's kind of how these different generations work. Not necessarily do these work with different generations. Some of these you could say, Austin, you know what? You broke it into 4 sections. All generations like these things. You're not necessarily wrong, but what I'm saying is you're tending to see more of these things as you go throughout the generations for performance and results. Great. Fantastic. So with that, guys, I think we've really kind of come to the following next steps. So I think this is getting really close to concluding. I have one more slide left. So I'm going to hop into this really quickly. So next steps, what I want to do here is saying, okay, so what can I do now? I have all this data, I have all this knowledge in my brain from these last 3 meetings, hopefully. And what can I do as I step back into the workplace or even with your family or your friends? And I think the biggest piece is just remember that we have to sometimes take in all these different things you've learned, and we have to rethink organizational structures. Traditional ladders, yes, they still work for some employees, but not all of them. So how do we rethink what our organizational structure looks like? Is it really 4 engineers and then a team lead and then a manager on top? Or can it be 5 engineers with 1 manager, right? It's these conversations you're having about lattice versus ladder, but taking these thoughts that we know about these different generations in. That's getting back to the traditional career paths. And then also, we need to make sure, as you guys saw with Gen Z, as our newest generation, right? A lot of people don't know a whole lot about them. What are you going to do for alpha and beta when they come? What does that look like? Now, I'm not saying you guys should know now because they're not in the workplace yet, but the same kind of thoughts and patterns of what we did today is like, how do I articulate this? And I will tell you guys, there is an inordinate amount of training on generational stuff out there for you. And I would say just make sure you keep that in mind, right? So with that, guys, that concludes our session. And I appreciate all you guys hanging out, asking super good questions, really good feedback. Before we end, I do want to open it up. I know I kind of buzzed through that last section. Any comments, anything you guys want to add on to what I mentioned? Call me out on anything. What do you guys think?
I'm going to chime in here. The times through these 3 part series that you offered exact tips of how to or what to do are extremely critical because, I don't think people realize that most companies don't even have an HR department or an HR director. So you have the finance director handling HR, or you have the owner of the company doing it all, so it's, these are very difficult concepts to get your head around. I know, I understand them, but in the heat of the moment, when you're doing it all, it's the tips, the how to, and the specific things, especially like today, it's extremely important because we're not HR professionals, so many of us, and we don't have that training. And, we're worried about the bottom line and what's happening next and what we have to get done tomorrow. And then it's like, oh my God, I got to coddle this person. I have to address this person that way. It's not, I'm just saying it's not easy. It's not an easy job. That's for sure. When you're in a position of authority and you're the one that is, setting the tone in the culture and making sure that, your employees feel valued and satisfied and are, getting the type of feedback that they need. It's a tough nut to hang on to. So,
Yeah. No, I hear you, Dan. I think that's the part and Pam will probably shake her head up and down with this. As HR professionals, this is what we live, breathe, and eat every day, right? Is people, how do you interact with them? How do you make the organization more successful? How do you make sure that everybody's functioning properly? And our biggest stakeholders, whether they be CEOs, CFOs, COOs, these guys are focusing on so many other things, right? Back to your point, Dan, the bottom line, I got to worry about that. Oh my goodness, the machine's down, we can't make parts. It's sometimes for them, it's not because they don't want to, it's because they just haven't had time to think about it. So that's where you partner with your HR colleagues and we make sure we train those folks to rethink things, right? That's when I say rethink career paths. I would say that's kind of on the HR team to drive that. Like, hey guys, this path isn't working anymore. And then your CEO is gonna be like, oh, well, tell me more, Pam. What do you mean? Well, have you ever thought that? Da, 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 da? And then, oh, wow, okay, because we have to realize that these guys, especially at the C-suite level, are usually always generalists. They're never super duper deep in one function, nor should they be, by the way, to be effective. So we got to help them along the way, right? I think that's the biggest piece. That's what you're saying, Dan. And I agree with you. The companies that don't have HR departments are severely missing out. And again, extremely biased because I'm an HR guy, but that's my 2 cents as well. Good. Thank you, Dan. Team, what else? Cindy, you've been along for the ride the whole time. What do you think?
Yeah, we talked about it this morning after one of my networking meetings, because the people that are in those networking meetings don't tend to have, well, there are a lot of boomers, and they're really missing Gen Z, who really doesn't even want to go to these things. And well, there's some millennials, but we're not sure. It seems like it's a boomer creation, and some people have adapted to it, but a lot of people don't want to get together and talk and be part of a group. So we haven't figured out, and we were wondering, do we just keep this structure, forever and just try to get the people to adapt, or do we have to change all these completely? And this would apply to the chamber, this would apply to Rotaries, this applies to, any networking group, especially business networking. So none of us had an answer, but I thought, oh, okay, I'll take a look at this 3-part series today and wonder if there was something I could take away to go back to talk to these groups about. So I don't know if you have any suggestions other than evaluate your audience and maybe try to make changes to adapt. But, what do you think?
Interesting. I would love for Dan to take the first stab at this because I believe, in my personal opinion, the chamber has tried to tackle this and they have successfully. I think it's always going to be a challenge no matter what, but the chamber themselves offer so many different avenues for people to attend. And Dan's very persistent, which is always good. And I think it takes some of that to make sure you drive it home. So Dan, do you want to just share some methods that you guys have deployed at the chamber? Because I think you guys do a great job.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the kind words. I think that the challenge is, I love change, but and I embrace change. Um, Sorry for my staff because they don't embrace it always as quickly as I do, but and that's not usual for a boomer. But I think we are always trying to adjust to what we're hearing. So there is nothing that is one size fits all anymore. So and as more tools come on board, whether it's you know, face to face, social media, AI, whatever. Nothing replaces anything. It just adds to the pile. So you have to just keep figuring out how to communicate with different people. We know our members pretty well. So we know who's good at email. We know who you have to text. We know, I mean, so because I'll have maybe a team member say, I've left 12 emails for this person. And I'm like, oh, they're never going to answer an email. You have to text them. So it's us knowing our members that well, but it's also trying a lot of different things. And I think that one of the things that we have tried to do recently is try to honor different industries without trying to be the expert in that industry. And, I'll use, manufacturing as an example. I think for too long, chambers tried to convene manufacturers to, make them, bring them up to date on what's happening and everything. Well, manufacturers are way ahead of us in their own industry. And, when we have the manufacturers roundtable, for instance, the focus group, most of the time, I don't even know what you guys are talking about. You're using terminology and things. I'm like, I have no clue, but I don't need to. My job is to convene that group and put them in an environment where they feel comfortable in developing those relationships and sharing, the knowledge that can help each other. I don't have to know everything. So I guess the shift has been, you don't have to, as a chamber president, we don't have to be experts in all these fields. We just have to know how to bring people together. We have to know where trends are going. We have to, and I don't know if I'm making it clear, but it is kind of a shift. It's more about setting up opportunities for people to communicate, gather, meet, whatever, in a way that is comfortable for them. And that is different with every industry, and it's different with every age group. So that's what we've been trying to do. So we still have to take care of the boomers who like the structure and all that, and we have to, as the generations change, we have to respond to that too. So no one size fits all, and it's very challenging and a heck of a lot of fun, because you can never sit back on your laurels and say, well, this works. And the other thing, extreme flexibility. I think that we have, I think that's one thing we're pretty good at. We're willing to try something and put our necks out there. And if our head gets chopped off, we grow a new one and we move forward and say, okay, well, at least we tried. So I don't know if that answers your question, Austin, but it's
Dan, actually, I had one big question to come out of that. That answered kind of another question, and that was good. But how do you attract younger generations to your chamber? Because in membership, it tends to be heavier at the older group. But what are you doing, or what can you do? I mean, you've got Jason, who's in a role, and he's a millennial. No, wait, what is he?
he's not as young as you think. He would like you to think that he's younger, but he's 40 years old. So
okay, because
He's
he's
a
in a
millennial, Dan. I think he squeezes in. He's the elder millennial, I think. That was his name. Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, you have somebody younger in that role that allows maybe him to connect better with some of the younger folks you want to bring in. I mean, maybe that's part of your strategy. But in general, what do you do to bring in and find younger members?
well, it's interesting because I think more younger ones are coming to us now than older ones. And I we don't have it all figured out, but I think because we listen, and the calls I get from younger members are more about assisting them with visionary ideas or future goals. Where older members, it's more about how can you help me in my business today? So it's more of an entrepreneurial conversation with the younger ones. And some of their ideas sometimes are kind of out there. You're like, I don't know if they're going to work or not, but a lot of people have had crazy ideas in the past that worked. I don't know if that answers your question.
That does. Thank you. That was
Like,
helpful.
and to bring that together even more, if Jason and I have a meeting together, you know, um, that person may be close to his age and feel more comfortable with the introductory conversation with him. But getting back to what Austin was saying earlier, but when they need advice or, that's when I get brought into the conversation. It's like, I have broader experience, I have broader knowledge, and so sometimes I will come into a meeting that Jason's in just for that period of time to say, okay, where are we? What's the discussion? What's the challenge? And once we've kind of had that conversation, I exit the room again and let them continue.
So a generational team is what it sounds like. Multi-generational team is one way to address it.
That's what we're trying to do. So
okay.
To Dan's point, Cindy, I think he hit on a lot of big things. I will tell you, from my personal perspective on Dan and I's relationship, the thing Dan does really well, so does the chamber, is they meet you where you are, right? So they will, when I say persistence and meet you where they are, he takes time out of his day to talk to me and spend time with me, and he cares about me and he remembers things about me that it means a lot to me. So then I will also show that back to Dan, right? And I think that's kind of the superpower of the chamber, because all of them are like this. And I think that's the part for just recruitment in general. If Dan spends 10 minutes and you get to know him and he's going to hyper focus on you for a 10-15 minute intro conversation, I promise you, you're going to walk away and know who Danny B is, and you're going to want to talk to him later, right? It's just kind of it's that methodology he uses and deploys. That's now what the chamber does, is why I think the chamber is so successful, because he meets them where they are and he takes the time to care about them. So back to your example you mentioned, when you say, man, I got a lot of boomers, I don't have a whole lot of other folks. The question you have to critically ask yourself is, are you meeting them where they are? Or are you saying, well, they're just not coming here, I don't know why, how do I attract them? Well, then go see what they're doing. Go hang out with them. Go take time and say, hey, I'm Cindy. What's your name? You have a cool haircut or whatever. I don't know. You just strike up conversation, because that's one of the things that we try to do as well, especially with the younger generation, is because sometimes you see that timidness, or I don't really know how to have these, because they get a bad rap for having the social the social skills. What I noticed, if you just go up to them and say, "Hey, I'm Austin. Nice to meet you, man. You like cars?" "Yeah, man, I got a oh, cool. Do you know we make high performance shocks that go on the T?" You strike up a conversation. Next thing you know, they're asking for your business card. They want to go do whatever. And I think that piece of the puzzle will solve almost any problem with generations across any industry because you're just taking the time to give a what about them, right? I think it's kind of funny because sometimes we forget about that, and it's just like sometimes you just go back to the basics and like, this ain't so hard. It's just kind of crazy sometimes. In my 2 cents, that's what I've noticed, and I think
Hey,
they have the chamber to
Austin,
do that.
follow up on that, a little bit. Cindy, to answer your question. I always like to talk to Austin because I'm like, yeah, we are still doing a few things right. It's that, meeting people where they are. I think that's something we really strive to do, and all my team is really good at that. We treat everybody the same. So whether you are running, $100 million company, or you have this crazy idea that you're coming in to bounce it off of us, we try to treat everybody with the same respect. And kind of like, so tell me what's going on. What are you trying to do? That type of thing.
Mhm.
And I don't know. I think that's something that my whole staff does pretty well.
Agreed with that, 100%. Good, awesome conversation. Anything else, guys and gals? What do you think? It's sad it's coming to a close, but I've enjoyed every single minute with you guys. I appreciate you all. Okay.
It's refreshing to hear the mutual conversations and concerns, and for those of us that are in HR, Austin, you probably feel it every now and then. You kind of feel like you're battling this on your own, and nobody else understands your pain.
Amen, sis.
So it's nice to know that there are challenges across numerous industries, and we're probably all within a stone's throw away from each other, and we're all trying to figure it out. So it's been good. I appreciate Dan. I appreciate the nudge to get me to do these last 3 months, and it's been well worth the time spent.
Good to hear, Pam. Thank you. All right. If there's nothing else for the good of the order, I think that's a wrap, Dan.
I'm sad that it's coming to a close. We may have to come up with another topic and bring you back in.
Yeah, buddy. Feel free. I
So
want to
thank
hear
you.
Pam. I want Pam to educate us on something.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Pam, you're not exempt here. So like,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
sure
Pam
you have
gets to
some
teach me something.
golden nuggets as well. So
Cindy or
HR, like I said,
Jill, Cindy or Jill can teach us. I mean, we can share the love.
HR is something that, like I said, 80% of businesses don't have an HR person, and that's a staggering number. But so the loneliness that you feel in your career path is the frustration that people feel that don't have someone to go to and say, now what the heck do I do? So I just kind of like to throw out there, I think one of the other things that we try to do at the chamber is if somebody's stuck, that maybe we can have them make a phone call and pick your brain, or, that type of thing. So, because we have some amazing expertise here, and, to be able to tap into that from time to time is extremely valuable.
Okay. Well, thank you guys. Till next time.
Thank you,
All
everyone.
right.
See you
Thank
guys.
you.
Have a good night.